A true story from California. My daughter-in-law said I'm too old to drive. When my daughter-in-law suggested I was becoming a danger on the road, I didn't raise my voice or argue back. I simply nodded, handed her the keys to my cherry red 1967 Mustang convertible, and walked into the house. She thought she had won. She thought she had finally convinced everyone that Margaret Chen, at 73 years old, had no business behind the wheel of a classic car. What she didn't know was that I had been racing cars since before she was born, and sometimes the best way to teach someone about respect is to show them what they're about to lose. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Margaret Chen, and I've been living in Palo Alto, California for 47 years. I moved here in 1977 with my late husband David when Silicon Valley was still more orchards than office buildings. We bought a modest ranch house on Middlefield Road when you could still afford to do that on a teacher's salary and a mechanic's wages. David taught high school mathematics, and I spent my days underneath the hoods of cars at Patterson's Auto Repair, one of the few women in the business back then. People used to do double takes when they saw me emerge from under a Chevy Nova, grease stains on my coveralls and a wrench in my hand. The 1970s weren't exactly welcoming to women who preferred carburetors to casseroles, but I had grown up with 4 brothers in Sacramento, and my father had taught all of us that understanding machines was just as important as understanding people. Maybe more important, because machines were honest. They broke down when you neglected them, ran smoothly when you treated them right, and never lied about what they needed. David and I never had children of our own. It wasn't for lack of trying or wanting, but sometimes life has its own plans. Instead, we poured our love into our work, our little house, and each other. David coached the school's math team and spent weekends helping struggling students at our kitchen table. I became the go-to mechanic for classic car enthusiasts throughout the Bay Area, specializing in muscle cars from the 60s and 70s. My reputation grew quietly, one perfectly tuned engine at a time. The Mustang came to me in 1985, a rusted-out shell of a car that had been sitting in someone's garage for 15 years. The owner's son wanted to sell it for scrap, but I saw something in those clean lines and that distinctive fastback profile. I bought it for $800 and spent 2 years bringing it back to life. New engine, rebuilt transmission, custom paint job in candy apple red that caught the California sun like liquid fire. David used to joke that I loved that car, more than I loved him, but we both knew that wasn't true. The Mustang was my masterpiece, but David was my heart. After David passed away from cancer in 2018, the house felt too quiet, too empty. The Mustang became my companion, my way of staying connected to the world. I would drive up Highway 1 to Half Moon Bay, feeling the ocean breeze through my hair and the rumble of the V8 engine beneath me. I drove to car shows in Monterey, to swap meets in Sacramento, to classic car gatherings where men twice my age would ask me about the engine specs and listen respectfully when I explained every modification I had made. That's when Daniel came into my life. My neighbor's son, 38 years old and recently divorced, with a smile that reminded me of David's and a genuine interest in vintage automobiles. He would stop by when he visited his mother, admiring the Mustang parked in my driveway, asking questions about the restoration process. One day, he brought his 8-year-old daughter Emma to see the car. She ran her small fingers along the chrome bumper with the same reverence I had felt as a child touching her grandfather's tools. Daniel and I became friends first, then something more. Not the passionate romance of young people, but something deeper, more comfortable. We shared coffee on Sunday mornings, worked together in my garage on weekends, and gradually, inevitably, fell in love. When he proposed 2 years later, it wasn't with grand gestures or expensive rings, but with a simple question asked while we were both covered in motor oil, rebuilding an engine together. I said yes, not because I needed saving or companionship, but because I had found someone who understood that love doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it creeps up on you like the sound of a perfectly tuned engine, steady and reliable and true. The wedding was small, just family, and a few close friends in my backyard. Emma served as our flower girl, scattering rose petals with serious concentration. That's when I first met Daniel's ex-wife, Jennifer, and her new husband, Marcus. Jennifer was everything I wasn't. Young, polished, successful in the tech industry, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. She worked for one of the big companies in Silicon Valley, something involving artificial intelligence and predictive algorithms that she explained in the kind of jargon that made my eyes glaze over. She was polite enough at the wedding, but I could see her taking inventory of my house, my clothes, my life. She smiled when Daniel introduced me as his wife, but the smile never reached her eyes. She made comments about how sweet it was that Daniel had found someone to keep him company in his later years, as if 38 was approaching retirement age. She asked about my hobbies, clearly not understanding that working on cars wasn't a pastime for me, but a profession, a passion, a way of life. Emma spent every other weekend with us, and those became the brightest spots in my routine. She was curious about everything, asking endless questions about how engines worked, why oil needed to be changed, what made some cars faster than others. I taught her to change a tire, to check fluid levels, to listen to the sound an engine makes when something isn't quite right. She had natural instincts for mechanical work, the kind of intuitive understanding that can't be taught, only recognized and nurtured. Jennifer didn't approve. She made that clear during the custody exchanges, standing in my driveway in her high heels and business suits watching Emma emerge from the garage with grease on her hands and joy on her face. She would make comments about Emma needing to focus on more practical skills, like coding or mathematics. She worried about Emma getting dirty, about the inappropriate language she might hear in a garage environment, about the old-fashioned values I might be instilling. I tried to be understanding. Jennifer was Emma's mother, and she had every right to be concerned about her daughter's welfare. But there was something condescending in her tone, something that suggested she viewed my entire way of life as somehow lesser, outdated, unworthy of respect. She would ask Daniel in front of me whether he was sure about his decision to remarry, whether he had really thought through the implications of bringing a child into an environment with so many potential hazards. The first real conflict came during Emma's 9th birthday party. Jennifer had planned an elaborate celebration at their house in Los Altos Hills, complete with a bouncy castle, catered food, and a magician. Emma had asked if she could invite some friends to see the Mustang afterward, to show off what she had learned about classic cars. Jennifer's response was swift and final. Absolutely not. She didn't want Emma's friends associating her with that old car or seeing Emma in that kind of environment. I watched my step-granddaughter's face fall, saw the disappointment she tried to hide behind a polite smile. Daniel started to protest, but I touched his arm gently, shook my head. This wasn't the hill to die on. There would be other opportunities, other ways to share my passion with Emma. I had learned long ago that sometimes the best response to unreasonable people is patience, not confrontation. But Jennifer wasn't finished. Over the following months, she began making subtle suggestions about my capabilities, my judgment, my fitness to be around Emma. She worried about the safety of my garage, with its tools and chemicals and heavy equipment. She questioned whether someone my age should be operating dangerous machinery. She made comments about my reflexes, my eyesight, my ability to handle emergency situations. The driving issue started small. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jennifer would mention, almost casually, that she had noticed I drove a bit slowly on the freeway. She worried about me taking Emma places in that old car without modern safety features like airbags and anti-lock brakes. She suggested that perhaps Emma should ride with Daniel instead, or better yet, with her, in her brand new Tesla with all the latest safety technology. I tried to address her concerns reasonably. I explained that I had been driving for over 50 years without a single accident, that I maintained my vehicles meticulously, that I was probably more familiar with automotive safety than most people half my age. I showed her the classic car, insurance documentation that proved my driving record was spotless, the registration showing the Mustang had passed every inspection and emissions test. None of it mattered. Jennifer had made up her mind that I was a liability, a danger, an old woman who refused to acknowledge her limitations. She began making her concerns known to Daniel, suggesting that he should have a conversation with me about my driving. She mentioned that her father had gracefully given up driving at 70, as if there were some magical age at which competence automatically disappeared. The tension came to a head on a Saturday morning in March. Emma was spending the weekend with us, and we had planned to drive to the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, one of the most prestigious classic car shows in the world. Emma had been looking forward to it for weeks, practicing the names of different makes and models, preparing to show off her knowledge to other car enthusiasts. Jennifer arrived early for the custody exchange, earlier than usual. She was dressed in yoga clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking more casual than I had ever seen her. But her expression was anything but relaxed. She stood in my driveway, arms crossed, staring at the Mustang with undisguised disapproval. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble. "I'm not comfortable with Emma going to this car show with you." Daniel stepped forward, but I raised my hand. This was between Jennifer and me. "May I ask why?" I said calmly. "It's a long drive," she replied. "Highway 1 can be dangerous, especially for someone who might not be as sharp as they used to be. And that car," she gestured dismissively, at the Mustang. "It's not exactly safe by modern standards." I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "I've driven that route hundreds of times. The car is in perfect mechanical condition. Emma will be wearing her seatbelt, and I never exceed the speed limit." Jennifer shook her head. "That's not the point, Margaret. The point is that you're 73 years old. Maybe it's time to acknowledge that you're not as capable as you once were. Maybe it's time to let other people do the driving." Emma appeared at my side, having heard the conversation from inside the house. Her eyes were wide, confused. She looked from her mother to me, sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. "But Grandma Margaret is the best driver I know," Emma said quietly. "She taught me about checking blind spots and using mirrors and everything." Jennifer's expression softened slightly when she looked at her daughter, but her resolve didn't waver. "Sweetheart, sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions about safety. Grandma Margaret has been driving for a very long time, and sometimes older people don't realize when they should stop." The words hung in the air like a challenge. I felt Daniel's hand on my shoulder, felt Emma's eyes on my face, waiting to see how I would respond. I could have argued. I could have listed my qualifications, my experience, my spotless driving record. I could have pointed out that I probably knew more about automotive safety than Jennifer would ever learn, that I had been maintaining and driving high-performance vehicles since before she was born. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys to the Mustang. The keyring was worn smooth from decades of use, engraved with the Ford logo and the year 1967. I had carried these keys every day for nearly 40 years. They were as much a part of me as my wedding ring or my watch. I held them out to Jennifer. "If you're concerned about Emma's safety," I said quietly, "then perhaps you should drive her yourself." Jennifer's eyes widened in surprise. She clearly hadn't expected me to capitulate so easily. I don't know how to drive a manual transmission," she stammered. "Then I suppose you'll need to learn," I replied. Or perhaps Emma can stay home with you today. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of Emma's sharp intake of breath. Jennifer looked at the keys in my outstretched hand, then at the Mustang, then back at me. For a moment, I thought she might back down, might realize that her concerns were based more on prejudice than reality. Instead, she reached out and took the keys. "Maybe that's for the best," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Emma can spend the day with Marcus and me instead. We were planning to go to the tech museum in San Jose." Emma's face crumpled, but she didn't protest. She was only 9 years old, caught between the adults in her life, trying to navigate a conflict she didn't understand. I knelt down to her level, placed my hands on her shoulders. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said gently. "There will be other car shows. And maybe next time you can teach your mom about stick shifts." Emma nodded, though I could see the tears she was trying to hold back. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry, Grandma Margaret." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I whispered back. "Nothing at all." I watched them drive away in Jennifer's Tesla, Emma's small face pressed against the back window. The keys to my Mustang were gone, but I wasn't defeated. I was planning. Because Jennifer had just made a critical mistake. She had assumed that taking away my keys would prove her point about my limitations. What she didn't realize was that she had just given me the perfect opportunity to show her exactly what those keys represented and what she was about to lose. That afternoon, I sat in my garage, surrounded by the tools and trophies and photographs that told the story of my life. I looked at the empty space where the Mustang usually sat, and I began to make phone calls. The first was to my insurance agent, asking about the process for removing a vehicle from my policy. The second was to Barrett Jackson Auction Company, asking about upcoming auctions for classic American muscle cars. The third call was to Emma's school, asking to speak with her teacher about a special project I wanted to propose. Jennifer thought she had won. She thought she had finally put the old woman in her place, finally shown everyone that Margaret Chen was past her prime, too old to be trusted with adult responsibilities. She had no idea that she had just lit a fuse that would change everything. The Mustang was more than just a car to me. It was proof of my skill, my dedication, my refusal to be limited by other people's expectations. It was worth more than Jennifer's Tesla, more than Marcus's BMW, more than most people's houses. And if Jennifer thought I was too old to drive it, then maybe it was time to find someone who truly appreciated what it represented. Someone who understood that respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. And Jennifer was about to learn the difference between the two, 1 horsepower at a time. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Jennifer had taken my keys. I was in my garage, organizing my tool collection for what I suspected might be the last time, when Daniel's phone rang. He was helping me sort through decades of accumulated parts and equipment, both of us moving slowly, as if prolonging the task might somehow delay whatever came next. I heard the change in his voice immediately. The casual greeting shifted to concern, then to something approaching panic. He stepped outside to continue the conversation, but I could see him through the window, one hand pressed to his forehead. His shoulders tense with stress I recognized all too well. When he came back inside, his face had gone pale. "That was Jennifer," he said quietly. "She's been let go from her job." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from an overheated engine. I set down the wrench I'd been holding, turned to face him fully. In 30 years of working on cars, I had learned to listen not just to what engines were saying, but to what people weren't saying. Daniel's voice carried more than just concern for his ex-wife's employment situation. "What happened?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the shape of it, if not the details. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his way of processing difficult information. "Restructuring," they said. "Budget cuts. Her entire division was eliminated. He paused, looking out toward the empty driveway, where the Mustang used to sit. She said it came out of nowhere, but I think she saw it coming. She's been working late every night for months, trying to prove her value to the company. I nodded, understanding more than he realized. The tech industry in Silicon Valley was notorious for its youth obsession, its casual disposal of employees, who were deemed less innovative, less adaptable, less willing to sacrifice their entire lives for the promise of stock options and company culture. Jennifer was 35, successful by most measures. But in a world where 25-year-olds were considered seasoned veterans, she was already fighting against perceptions of obsolescence. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 weeks ago, Jennifer had declared me too old to be trusted with adult responsibilities. Now she was discovering that age discrimination worked in multiple directions, and competence mattered less than perception when companies made decisions about who to keep and who to discard. Over the following days, I watched the situation unfold through Daniel's worried phone calls and Emma's confused questions. Jennifer had been given 2 weeks severance pay and a letter of recommendation that praised her contributions while carefully avoiding any commitment to future employment. Marcus, her husband, worked in the same industry and was suddenly nervous about his own job security. They had a mortgage that reflected their dual tech salaries, car payments on vehicles that cost more than most people's annual income, and a lifestyle built on the assumption that the money would always keep flowing. Emma's weekend visits became more frequent as Jennifer scrambled to find new employment. She would arrive at our house with her laptop bag and a distracted expression, spending hours in video interviews and networking calls while Emma entertained herself. The confident woman who had questioned my judgment just weeks earlier now seemed smaller somehow, uncertain in a way that reminded me of my younger self when I had first started working in a male-dominated industry. I felt no satisfaction in Jennifer's struggles. Contrary to what she might have expected, I took no pleasure in watching her confidence crumble or her carefully constructed life begin to show cracks. I had been where she was, not in the same circumstances, but in the same emotional territory. I knew what it felt like to have your professional identity questioned, to wonder if you were really as capable as you thought you were, to face the possibility that everything you had built might not be as secure as it appeared. Instead of gloating, I found myself cooking extra portions when Daniel and Emma were staying for dinner, quietly ensuring there were leftovers that Daniel could take home. I didn't mention Jennifer's situation directly, but I made sure Emma knew she was welcome to stay with us whenever she needed to, for as long as she needed to. Jennifer's job search stretched from days into weeks. The tech industry, which had once seemed like an endless source of opportunity, suddenly felt competitive and unwelcoming. Companies wanted candidates who were younger, cheaper, more desperate. They wanted people who would work 80-hour weeks without complaint, who would relocate anywhere in the world on short notice, who had no family obligations or personal commitments that might interfere with total dedication to corporate goals. Jennifer had none of these advantages. She was a divorced mother with custody responsibilities, a homeowner with geographic limitations, a professional with salary expectations based on her previous experience. In a market flooded with eager young graduates and experienced professionals, displaced by other corporate restructurings, she was just another resume in an increasingly large pile. The financial pressure began to show first in small ways. Jennifer started picking Emma up in Marcus's car instead of her Tesla, claiming hers was in the shop. She began suggesting less expensive activities for their weekends together, trading, museum visits for walks in the park, restaurant meals for picnics with homemade sandwiches. She looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion, the kind of weariness that comes from constantly projecting confidence you don't feel, while fielding rejection after rejection. Daniel tried to help, offering to adjust their custody arrangement to reduce Jennifer's financial obligations, suggesting he could cover more of Emma's expenses until she found new employment. But Jennifer's pride, the same pride that had led her to dismiss my capabilities, now prevented her from accepting assistance she desperately needed. 2 months into her unemployment, Jennifer made a decision that surprised everyone. She asked Daniel if Emma could spend the summer with us instead of alternating weeks between households. She claimed it was because she wanted to focus entirely on her job search without distractions, but I suspected the truth was more complicated. She was struggling to maintain the appearance of stability for her daughter, while her own world felt increasingly uncertain. Emma was delighted with the arrangement. At 9 years old, she was too young to fully understand the adult complexities that had led to this extended stay, but old enough to appreciate the freedom it represented. She could spend entire days in the garage with me, learning not just about cars, but about problem-solving, patience, and the satisfaction that comes from working with your hands. I taught her to rebuild a carburetor, starting with a simple single-barrel unit from an old lawnmower. Her small fingers were actually better suited to some of the delicate work than my arthritis-stiffened hands, and she had the kind of focused attention that reminded me of myself at her age. She asked questions constantly, not just about how things worked, but about why they were designed the way they were. What happened when they broke down? How you could tell when something needed to be replaced versus repaired. More importantly, she began to understand the broader lessons that mechanical work teaches. That rushing leads to mistakes. That every component has a purpose, even if it seems insignificant. That the best solutions are often the simplest ones. That there's a difference between something that looks good and something that works well. During these summer weeks, Jennifer would occasionally stop by for brief visits with Emma. She always seemed uncomfortable in my garage, standing awkwardly near the entrance while Emma showed off her latest project or explained some mechanical principle she had recently mastered. Jennifer would smile and nod appropriately, but I could see her calculating the value of what Emma was learning against the opportunities she might be missing. One afternoon in July, Jennifer arrived earlier than expected for one of these visits. Emma was helping me install a rebuilt alternator in a 1972 Camaro that belonged to one of my regular customers, and she didn't notice her mother's approach until Jennifer spoke. "Emma, honey, you're getting filthy again," Jennifer said, though her tone was gentler than it had been in previous months. "Why don't you go wash up so we can talk?" Emma looked at me questioningly, and I nodded toward the house. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Use the soap by the kitchen sink. It cuts through grease better than the bathroom stuff." After Emma left, Jennifer remained standing in the garage doorway, looking around at the organized chaos of tools, parts, and projects that filled the space. She seemed to be seeing it differently now, though I couldn't tell whether the change was in her perception or in her circumstances. "She's learned a lot this summer," Jennifer said finally. "She has," I agreed. "She has good instincts for this kind of work." Jennifer nodded, then surprised me by stepping further into the garage. She approached the workbench where Emma and I had been working, looking down at the alternator installation with what appeared to be genuine curiosity, rather than her usual polite disinterest. "How do you know what to do?" she asked. "I mean, how did you learn all of this?" It was the first real question she had ever asked me about my work, and I could hear something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Not quite vulnerability, but a crack in the certainty that had previously characterized all our interactions. "The same way you learn to code," I said. "Practice, mistakes, more practice. My father taught me the basics, but mostly I learned by doing, by taking things apart and putting them back together until I understood how they worked." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, running her finger along the edge of the workbench. "Emma says you never get frustrated when something doesn't work the first time." "Frustration doesn't fix engines," I replied. "And most problems have logical solutions if you're patient enough to find them." She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if she were seeing something she had missed before. "I've been thinking about what you said," she continued, "about Emma learning practical skills. I'm starting to understand that maybe I've been too focused on one kind of intelligence." It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get, and I recognized it as such. Jennifer was struggling with more than unemployment. She was questioning assumptions about value and competence that had shaped her entire adult life. The tech industry that had rewarded her for being young, innovative, and aggressive had discarded her with the same casual efficiency she had once applied to evaluating other people's worth. Intelligence comes in many forms, I said. The trick is recognizing it in yourself and others. Jennifer nodded slowly, then asked a question that surprised me with its directness. Do you think I made a mistake? About the driving, I mean. About taking your keys? I considered my answer carefully. The truth was complicated, layered with hurt feelings and wounded pride, but also with understanding that came from my own experiences with being underestimated and dismissed. I think you were trying to protect Emma, I said finally. And I think you had some assumptions about aging and competence that aren't necessarily accurate. But mostly, I think you were scared. Scared of what? Of not being in control. Of trusting someone else with something precious to you. Of acknowledging that experience might sometimes be more valuable than youth. Jennifer was quiet for a long time after that, standing in my garage surrounded by the tools and trophies and accumulated wisdom of my working life. When Emma returned, clean-faced and eager to continue our project, Jennifer watched us work together, with an expression I couldn't quite read. As summer progressed, Jennifer's job search continued to yield disappointing results. The interviews became less frequent, the rejections more formulaic. Companies were looking for candidates with more recent experience in specific technologies, with advanced degrees in emerging fields, with the kind of cutting-edge expertise that required constant updating and reinvention. Meanwhile, Emma was mastering skills that hadn't fundamentally changed in decades. Internal combustion engines operated on the same basic principles whether they were installed in a 1967 Mustang or a 2023 pickup truck. The ability to diagnose problems by listening to engine sounds, to feel when a component wasn't functioning properly, to understand the logical relationships between different systems. These capabilities were as valuable now as they had been when I first learned them. By August, Jennifer had burned through most of her savings and was facing difficult decisions about her future. The mortgage on their Los Altos Hills house was consuming an increasingly large percentage of their remaining resources, and Marcus's job, while still secure, wasn't sufficient to maintain their previous lifestyle alone. That's when I made Jennifer an offer that surprised both of us. I had been thinking about it for weeks, watching her struggle with a job market that seemed designed to exclude people like her, listening to her growing desperation during her conversations with Daniel. I knew what it felt like to be dismissed because of other people's preconceptions, and I knew how difficult it could be to rebuild your professional identity once it had been damaged. More importantly, I had been thinking about the phone calls I had made back in March, when Jennifer first took my keys. The conversation with Barrett Jackson Auction Company had been enlightening in ways I hadn't expected. The classic car market was stronger than ever, with well-restored muscle cars commanding prices that reflected their rarity and desirability. My Mustang, with its documented restoration history and pristine condition, was worth considerably more than I had realized. But I had also learned something else during that conversation. The auction house was looking for someone to help with their digital marketing efforts, specifically someone who could help them reach younger demographics and navigate social media, platforms that were becoming increasingly important for high-end vehicle sales. It was work that required exactly the kind of skills Jennifer possessed: understanding of digital platforms, experience with targeted marketing, ability to create compelling content that would appeal to affluent buyers. It was also work that could be done remotely, with flexible scheduling that would accommodate her responsibilities as a mother. The position paid less than her previous job, but it offered something that might be more valuable in the long term: the opportunity to learn about an industry that valued experience, craftsmanship, and the kind of deep knowledge that took decades to develop. When I presented the idea to Jennifer, her initial response was skeptical. She knew nothing about classic cars. she pointed out. She had never worked in the auction business. She wasn't sure her skills would translate to such a different industry. But as we talked, I could see her beginning to understand the possibilities. The classic car world was full of people like me, passionate experts who had spent their lives accumulating knowledge, but who struggled with modern marketing and communication technologies. There was a gap between the expertise and the audience, a problem that someone with her background might be uniquely positioned to solve. More importantly, it was work that would allow her to learn from people who had built their reputations on competence rather than youth, who valued patience and precision over speed and innovation. It was an industry where being older might actually be an advantage, where gray hair could signal wisdom rather than obsolescence. Jennifer took the job. Her first assignment was to help promote an upcoming auction featuring American muscle cars from the 1960s and 1970s. As she began researching the vehicles and their histories, she started asking me questions about restoration, techniques, market values, and the cultural significance of different makes and models. I found myself enjoying these conversations in ways I hadn't expected. Jennifer was intelligent and curious, and once she set aside her preconceptions about my relevance, she proved to be an excellent student. She had the kind of analytical mind that could quickly grasp complex relationships between different factors that affected vehicle values, rarity, condition, provenance, market trends, cultural nostalgia. More importantly, she began to understand that the classic car world was about more than just expensive toys for wealthy collectors. It was about preservation of craftsmanship, celebration of engineering excellence, and connection to automotive history that represented some of the best aspects of American manufacturing and design. As autumn approached, Jennifer was not only succeeding in her new role, but genuinely enjoying it. She had developed relationships with collectors, restorers, and auction house specialists who appreciated her fresh perspective and digital expertise. She was making less money than before, but she was also working in an environment that valued her contributions and offered opportunities for long-term growth. Emma had returned to school, but continued spending most of her free time in my garage, now serving as an unofficial translator between her mother's digital world and my mechanical one. She would help Jennifer understand technical specifications and explain to me the social media strategies her mother was developing to reach new audiences. One evening in September, as I was cleaning up after a day spent rebuilding a transmission, Jennifer appeared in my garage doorway, but this time, instead of hovering uncertainly at the entrance, she walked directly to my workbench and picked up one of my wrenches, examining it with the kind of attention she had previously reserved for her laptop screen. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what Emma could learn if she spent more time here with you. Not just about cars, but about the way you approach problems, the patience, the attention to detail, the willingness to start over when something doesn't work." I looked at her, this woman who had once dismissed my life's work as outdated and irrelevant, who was now beginning to understand that competence and wisdom didn't always correlate with age or technology adoption. "Those are good skills to learn," I agreed. Jennifer set down the wrench and turned to face me directly. "I owe you an apology, Margaret. Not just for taking your keys, but for the assumptions I made about your capabilities. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." It was the apology I had been waiting for, but now that it had arrived, I found I didn't need it as much as I had expected. Jennifer's struggles over the past months had taught her the lessons I couldn't have conveyed through argument or demonstration. She had learned about the arbitrary nature of professional dismissal, about the value of experience and craftsmanship, about the importance of respecting expertise wherever it was found. More importantly, she had learned that age and irrelevance weren't synonymous, that competence took many forms, and that the skills I had developed over decades of working with my hands were as valuable as anything she had learned in her corporate career. "Apology accepted," I said simply. "But I think you've already learned what you needed to learn." Jennifer smiled, and for the first time since I had known her, The expression seemed completely genuine. "I'd like to learn more," she said. "About cars, I mean. About what Emma is learning here. Would you be willing to teach me?" I looked at this woman who had once stood in my driveway and declared me too old to be trusted with adult responsibilities, who was now asking to become my student. The irony was complete, but so was the opportunity. "We'll start with something simple," I said. "How to change oil. It's not complicated, but it's fundamental. Everything else builds from there." Jennifer nodded eagerly, and I realized that something had shifted between us that went beyond apologies or forgiveness. We had found common ground in the most unexpected place, in her willingness to learn and my willingness to teach, in the recognition that competence and wisdom could flow in both directions, regardless of age or background. As I reached for my teaching tools, I thought about the keys she had taken from me months earlier. Keys that still sat unused in her kitchen drawer. Soon, I thought, it might be time to return them. But first, she had some learning to do. The first lesson took place on a Saturday morning in October, when the California air carried that crisp promise of cooler weather that made working outdoors almost pleasant. Jennifer arrived at my house wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger and less polished than I was accustomed to seeing her. She carried a small notebook and pen, as if she were attending a business meeting rather than learning to change motor oil. Emma bounced around us excitedly, eager to serve as assistant instructor for her mother's automotive education. She had already laid out the tools we would need, organized them on a clean shop towel with the kind of precision that reminded me of myself at her age. There was something deeply satisfying about watching 3 generations of women preparing to work together under the hood of a car. I had chosen Daniel's Honda Civic for this first lesson, reasoning that it would be less intimidating than working on one of my classic restorations. The Honda was practical, accessible, forgiving of mistakes in a way that a vintage engine might not be. Jennifer needed to build confidence before she tackled anything more complex or valuable. "The first thing you need to understand," I told Jennifer as we stood looking at the closed hood, "is that cars are logical. They operate according to principles that don't change based on who's working on them or how much experience that person has. If you understand the logic, you can diagnose problems and find solutions." Jennifer nodded and made a note in her little book. I suppressed a smile at her instinct to document everything, recognizing the same systematic approach that had probably served her well in her previous career. Some habits translated across industries better than others. I showed her how to safely lift the hood and secure it with the hood prop, explaining the importance of making sure the engine was cool before beginning any work. She listened intently, asking questions about why we waited for the engine to cool, how long that typically took, what could happen if you didn't follow proper safety procedures. Emma chimed in with her own explanations, proudly demonstrating her knowledge of engine components and their functions. "That's the radiator, Mom. It keeps the engine from overheating. And that's the battery. It starts the car and powers all, the electrical stuff. And see that dipstick? That's how you check the oil level." Jennifer's eyes widened as she took in the complexity of the engine compartment. I could see her trying to make sense of the maze of hoses, wires, and metal components that filled the space under the hood. It was the same expression I had seen on dozens of faces over the years, that mixture of curiosity and intimidation that came with the first real look at automotive engineering. "It's more complicated than I expected," Jennifer admitted. "I mean, I knew cars were complex, but seeing it all laid out like this..." "It looks complicated because you're seeing everything at once," I explained. "But if you focus on one system at a time, it starts to make sense. Today, we're only concerned with the lubrication system. Everything else is just context." I walked her through the oil change process, step by step, explaining not just what to do, but why each step mattered, how oil lubricates moving parts to prevent friction and wear. why it needs to be changed regularly as it accumulates contaminants and breaks down over time, how the filter removes particles that could damage engine components. Jennifer proved to be a careful student, following instructions precisely and asking thoughtful questions about each stage of the process. She was hesitant at first when it came to actually loosening the drain plug, worried about applying too much force or stripping the threads. But with Emma's encouragement and my guidance, she successfully completed her first oil change. The look of satisfaction on her face when we lowered the hood was unmistakable. She had accomplished something concrete, something she could see and touch and be proud of. It wasn't a presentation or a marketing campaign or a digital strategy. It was a basic maintenance task that would help keep a car running smoothly for thousands of miles. "I can't believe I actually did that," she said, wiping her hands on a shop towel. "I mean, I know it's not complicated, but it feels like I learned something real." "You did learn something real," I confirmed. "And now you know more about how your car works than most people ever will." Over the following weeks, our Saturday morning lessons became a regular routine. Jennifer proved to be an eager and capable student, approaching each new task with the same analytical mindset she had applied to her previous career. We progressed from oil changes to tire rotations, from checking fluid levels to replacing air filters. More importantly, she began to understand the broader philosophy that guided my approach to automotive work. The importance of preventive maintenance over emergency repairs. The value of understanding your tools and using them properly. The satisfaction that comes from solving problems with your hands rather than hiring someone else to solve them for you. Emma served as our enthusiastic assistant and occasional instructor, having mastered many of these basic skills during her summer apprenticeship. She delighted in her role as bridge between her mother's world and mine, translating technical concepts into terms Jennifer could understand while demonstrating procedures with growing confidence. One morning in November, as we were changing the brake pads on Jennifer's Tesla, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Margaret, do you miss it? Working professionally, I mean. Having your own shop, being known as an expert in your field?" I paused in my work, considering how to answer. The truth was more complicated than I had expected it to be. I had loved my career, had taken deep pride in my reputation and expertise. But I had also found satisfaction in this new role, as teacher and mentor, in passing on knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. "I miss some aspects of it," I said finally. "I miss the challenge of complex problems, the satisfaction of bringing a dead engine back to life. But I've discovered that teaching can be just as rewarding as doing, sometimes more so." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully, then surprised me with her next comment. "I've been thinking about something. About the auction house job, and about what I'm learning here with you. What if there was a way to combine them?" She went on to explain an idea that had been developing in her mind over the past several weeks. The classic car auction world was full of people like me, experts with decades of experience but limited ability to reach modern audiences. At the same time, there were younger enthusiasts who were passionate about vintage automobiles, but lacked the practical knowledge to properly maintain and restore them. What if there was a way to bridge that gap? What if experienced mechanics and restorers could share their knowledge through digital platforms, teaching practical skills to a new generation of classic car enthusiasts? What if the same technology that had made Jennifer's previous career possible could be used to preserve and transmit automotive expertise that was in danger of being lost? Jennifer had been researching the idea, reaching out to contacts in the classic car community through her work with the auction house. She had discovered a significant demand for practical automotive education, particularly from younger people who were interested in classic cars but intimidated by the complexity of restoration and maintenance. "I think there's a real opportunity here," she said, her voice carrying the kind of excitement I hadn't heard from her since before she lost her previous job. "Not just for me, but for people like you who have knowledge that needs to be preserved and shared." The idea intrigued me more than I had expected it to. I had spent my career working with my hands, solving problems one car at a time. The thought of reaching a broader audience, of sharing knowledge with people I might never meet in person, was both exciting and daunting. Jennifer's proposal was ambitious but well-reasoned. She envisioned a digital platform that would offer practical automotive education, combining high-quality video instruction with hands-on learning opportunities. Experienced mechanics and restorers would create content covering everything from basic maintenance to complex restoration techniques. Students could access the material at their own pace, ask questions, and even arrange for in-person mentorship when possible. The business model would be sustainable, generating revenue through subscription fees and partnerships with tool manufacturers and parts suppliers. But more importantly, it would serve a genuine need in the automotive community, preserving knowledge that might otherwise disappear as older generations of experts retired or passed away. I've already talked to several people at Barrett-Jackson about this, Jennifer continued. They're interested in partnering with us, providing content, and helping to promote the platform to their customer base. And I've reached out to some automotive influencers who have large followings but limited technical expertise. They're excited about the possibility of offering their audiences something more substantial than just entertainment. The more Jennifer explained her vision, the more I could see its potential. This wasn't just another startup or get-rich-quick scheme. It was a thoughtful attempt to solve a real problem in a way that honored both traditional expertise and modern communication methods. But what excited me most was the opportunity to work alongside Jennifer as a true partner rather than just her teacher. She had skills I lacked and needed, while I had knowledge and experience she couldn't acquire any other way. Together, we might be able to create something neither of us could accomplish alone. "What would you need from me?" I asked. Jennifer's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Everything," she said. "Your expertise, your reputation in the classic car, community, your ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms. You would be the heart of the platform, the voice that people trust when they're learning something new." She showed me mock-ups she had created, sample lesson plans, and preliminary market research. The level of detail and thought she had put into the project was impressive, demonstrating the same analytical skills that had made her successful in her previous career. But more importantly, I could see that she understood something fundamental about what we were trying to accomplish. This wasn't about replacing traditional apprenticeship or hands-on learning. It was about extending those opportunities to people who might not otherwise have access to them, creating bridges between generations of automotive enthusiasts. Over the following month, we worked together to develop the concept further. Jennifer handled the business planning, marketing strategy, and technical development, while I focused on curriculum design and content creation. Emma served as our test audience, helping us understand how to present complex information in ways that would be accessible to younger learners. The first course we developed together was Classic Car Ownership for Beginners, a comprehensive introduction to buying, maintaining, and enjoying vintage automobiles. We covered everything from how to evaluate a potential purchase to basic restoration techniques, from understanding engine fundamentals to navigating the parts and services market. I found the process of creating educational content to be more challenging and rewarding than I had anticipated. It required me to think systematically about knowledge I had accumulated over decades, to break down complex procedures into logical steps, to anticipate the questions and concerns that beginners might have. Jennifer proved to be an excellent collaborator, bringing fresh perspectives to material I had been working with for so long that some aspects had become automatic. She asked the kinds of questions that forced me to examine my assumptions, to explain not just what to do, but why it mattered. More importantly, she helped me understand how to communicate effectively with audiences who were very different from the customers I had worked with throughout my career. The people who would access our digital platform might be younger, less experienced, more diverse in their backgrounds and motivations. They needed different kinds of support and encouragement than the car enthusiasts who had frequented my shop. By December, we had completed our first course and were ready to launch a beta version of the platform. Jennifer had secured partnerships with several tool manufacturers and parts suppliers, while I had recruited a handful of other experienced mechanics and restorers to create additional content. The response exceeded our expectations. Within the first week, we had hundreds of subscribers from across the country and around the world. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with students praising both the quality of the instruction and the accessibility of the presentation. One comment that particularly moved me came from a young woman in Texas who wrote, "I've always been interested in classic cars, but felt intimidated by the male-dominated culture of car shows and restoration shops. This platform gives me a safe space to learn at my own pace, and Margaret's teaching style makes even complex topics seem manageable." Another subscriber, a recently retired engineer in Florida, shared, "I've wanted to restore a vintage Mustang for years, but didn't know where to start. These lessons have given me the confidence to finally buy my dream car and begin working on it myself." The success of our platform created opportunities neither Jennifer nor I had anticipated. We were invited to speak at automotive trade shows and classic car events. Magazines and websites wanted to feature articles about our work. Other educational organizations reached out about potential partnerships and collaborations. But the most satisfying aspect of our success was watching Jennifer transform from a reluctant student into a confident partner. She had not only learned to change oil and replace brake pads, she had developed a genuine appreciation for the craft and culture of automotive restoration. She could now hold her own in conversations with experienced mechanics and restorers, contributing valuable insights from her unique perspective. Emma, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity among our subscribers. Her appearances in instructional videos demonstrating techniques and asking questions that reflected a beginner's perspective were consistently among the most popular content on our platform. She had a natural ability to communicate complex ideas in simple terms, combined with an infectious enthusiasm that inspired other young people to overcome their own intimidation about working on cars. One evening in January, as we were planning content for the coming year, Jennifer made an observation that surprised me with its insight. "You know what I think the real value of this platform is?" she said. "It's not just about teaching people to work on cars. It's about showing them that they're capable of learning things that seem impossible at first. It's about building confidence and problem-solving skills that apply to every area of life." She was right, of course. The technical skills we were teaching were valuable, but the underlying lessons about patience, persistence, and systematic thinking were even more important. We were helping people discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed, encouraging them to tackle challenges they might otherwise have avoided. As winter turned to spring, our partnership deepened and evolved. Jennifer had become not just my business partner, but a true collaborator and friend. We spent hours discussing automotive history, restoration techniques, and the cultural significance of classic cars. She brought fresh perspectives to topics I had been thinking about for decades, while I provided the depth of experience that gave credibility to our educational mission. The success of our platform had also restored Jennifer's professional confidence in ways that surprised both of us. She was no longer the defeated woman who had struggled with unemployment and uncertainty. She had found work that combined her technical skills with genuine passion, that valued both innovation and tradition, that offered opportunities for long-term growth and development. Most importantly, she had learned to see value in forms of expertise she had previously dismissed. The competence gap between us had closed not because I had become more technologically sophisticated, but because she had developed appreciation for the kinds of knowledge that couldn't be reduced to algorithms or automated processes. One warm afternoon in March, almost exactly a year after Jennifer had taken my keys, she appeared in my garage carrying something I recognized immediately. The worn key ring with the Ford logo and the year 1967, the keys to my cherry red Mustang, that had been sitting unused in her kitchen drawer for months. "I think it's time to return these," she said, holding them out to me. I looked at the keys, then at Jennifer, then at Emma, who was watching our exchange with interest. The moment felt significant in ways that went beyond the simple return of car keys. It represented the completion of a circle, the resolution of a conflict that had taught all of us important lessons about respect, competence, and the complex relationships between generations. But as I reached for the keys, I realized something had changed. They no longer represented just my independence or Jennifer's disrespect. They had become symbols of something larger, something that connected past and present, tradition and innovation, individual expertise and shared knowledge. "Actually," I said, closing Jennifer's fingers around the keys, "I think you should keep them for now. But not because I can't drive, because I think it's time you learn to appreciate what they really represent." Jennifer looked confused, but Emma grinned with understanding. She had been waiting for this moment, I realized, watching our relationship evolve and waiting to see how the story would end. "Come on," I said, walking toward the garage door. "Let's take her for a drive, all three of us. It's time you learned what that car can really do." The morning sun cast long shadows across my driveway as I pulled the cover off the Mustang for the first time in nearly a year. The cherry red paint gleamed despite months of storage, and the chrome bumpers reflected the California light like mirrors. Jennifer stood beside me, keys still clutched in her hand, staring at the car with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It wasn't the dismissive look she had worn when she first took my keys, nor the polite disinterest she had shown during Emma's early automotive lessons. This was something closer to reverence, the kind of respect that comes from understanding rather than obligation. She had spent months learning about engines and transmissions, about restoration and maintenance, about the difference between transportation and passion. Now she was seeing my Mustang not just as an old car, but as a masterpiece of engineering and craftsmanship. Emma bounced excitedly around the vehicle, pointing out details she had helped me maintain over the years. The perfect alignment of the hood scoop, the pristine condition of the original chrome, the way the interior leather had been carefully preserved and conditioned. She had developed an expert's eye for automotive excellence, and she wanted her mother to see what she was seeing. "The engine is a 289 high-performance V8, Emma explained with professional authority. "Grandma Margaret rebuilt it completely. In 1987, boarded out 30 thousandths over, added a mild cam, and balanced the rotating assembly. It makes about 300 horsepower, which was a lot for 1967. Jennifer listened with the kind of attention she had once reserved for quarterly earnings reports and market analysis presentations. She asked questions about compression ratios and carburetor tuning, about the differences between original equipment and performance modifications. Her notebook was nowhere to be seen, but I could tell she was filing away every detail for future reference. "Before we drive anywhere," I said, "you need to understand what you're getting into. This isn't like your Tesla with its computer-controlled everything and safety systems. This is a machine that requires your full attention and respect. It will respond to your inputs exactly and immediately, without any electronic intervention to save you from mistakes." I walked Jennifer through the pre-flight inspection routine I had developed over decades of driving high-performance vehicles, checking tire pressure and tread wear, examining fluid levels and belt tension, looking for any signs of leaks or loose connections. It was a ritual that served both practical and psychological purposes, ensuring the car was ready for operation, while also preparing the driver for the responsibility they were about to assume. Jennifer approached each step with scientific curiosity, asking about the reasoning behind every check and the consequences of skipping any part of the process. She was beginning to understand that driving a classic car wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, but about engaging with a complex mechanical system that demanded knowledge, skill, and respect. The first thing you need to know about driving a manual transmission, I continued, is that it's a conversation between you and the machine. The clutch pedal is your vocabulary, the gear shift is your grammar, and the engine's response is how the car talks back to you. You have to listen to what it's telling you and respond appropriately. I demonstrated the proper seating position, the correct way to operate the clutch and accelerator pedals, the smooth coordination required to shift gears without grinding or lurching. Jennifer watched intently, her analytical mind working to understand the mechanical relationships and timing involved in each movement. Emma climbed into the back seat, buckling her seatbelt with practiced efficiency. She had been riding in the Mustang since she was old enough to sit up on her own, and she knew the routines and rituals that made these drives safe and enjoyable. She also served as our unofficial safety monitor, reminding us to check mirrors, adjust seats, and follow all the procedures I had taught her over the years. When I started the engine, Jennifer's eyes widened at the sound. The Mustang's V8 had a distinctive rumble that spoke of power and precision, a mechanical symphony that no electric motor could replicate. The exhaust note was tuned to perfection, deep and throaty without being obnoxiously loud, the kind of sound that made other car enthusiasts turn their heads in appreciation. "Feel that?" I asked, placing Jennifer's hand on the dashboard where she could sense the engine's vibrations. "That's 300 horsepower at idle, just waiting for your command. Respect it, and it will give you an experience you'll never forget. Abuse it, and it will teach you lessons you won't want to learn." I pulled out of the driveway slowly, giving Jennifer time to adjust to the sounds and sensations of riding in a classic muscle car. The steering was heavier than what she was used to, requiring actual physical effort rather than computer assistance. The ride was firmer, transmitting road imperfections directly to the occupants, rather than filtering them through sophisticated suspension systems. Everything about the experience was more immediate, more visceral, more connected to the actual act of driving. We headed west toward Highway 1, taking surface streets through Palo Alto and into the hills that separated Silicon Valley from the Pacific Ocean. Jennifer sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap, trying to process the sensory overload of riding in a vehicle that communicated so directly with its occupants. She could hear every gear change, feel every shift in road surface, smell the distinctive aroma of hot oil and gasoline that classic cars carried with them. "It's so different," she said, raising her voice slightly to be heard over the engine noise. "Everything is so immediate, so present. You can't just zone out and let the car drive itself." "That's exactly right," I replied, downshifting as we approached a stop sign. "This car demands your full attention and participation. It makes you a better driver because it doesn't forgive carelessness or inattention." As we climbed into the Bay Santa Cruz Mountains, I began to demonstrate the Mustang's capabilities. The car handled the winding roads with surprising grace, its well-tuned suspension and perfectly balanced chassis allowing it to flow through corners with confidence and precision. Jennifer gripped the door handle initially, but gradually relaxed, as she began to trust both the car and my driving. Emma provided running commentary from the back seat, explaining to her mother the techniques I was using to maintain speed and stability through the curves. She had absorbed years of informal instruction during our drives, and she understood the physics and mechanics involved in high-performance driving better than most adults ever would. When we reached a straight section of road with good visibility, I pulled over at a scenic overlook and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was almost shocking after the constant rumble of the V8, and for a moment we all just sat there, absorbing the experience we had just shared. "Your turn," I said to Jennifer, holding out the keys. Her face went pale. "I can't drive this car. I don't know how to use a clutch, and it's too valuable, and I'll probably stall it or strip the gears or crash it into a tree." "You'll do fine," I assured her. "Emma and I will talk you through it, and we'll start with something simple. Just getting the car moving and stopping it again. Nothing fancy, nothing that could cause damage." It took 15 minutes of patient instruction before Jennifer managed her first successful start from a standstill. The Mustang lurched and bucked initially as she learned to coordinate the clutch and accelerator, but gradually her movements became smoother and more confident. Emma cheered each small success, celebrating her mother's progress with genuine enthusiasm. "Feel how the clutch engages?" I asked, as Jennifer practiced finding the friction point. "It's not an on-off switch like you're used to. It's a gradual connection that you can control with your foot. The car is telling you exactly what it needs if you listen to the feedback." Jennifer's concentration was absolute, her usual multitasking tendencies replaced by singular focus on the mechanical task at hand. She was discovering what every manual transmission driver learns eventually, that operating a clutch successfully requires presence, patience, and practice. There were no shortcuts, no automation, no way to delegate the responsibility to computer systems. After an hour of practice in the parking lot, Jennifer had mastered the basic coordination required to drive a manual transmission. Her starts were smooth, her shifts were clean, and she had developed enough confidence to take the car onto public roads. We switched seats, and I guided her through increasingly complex driving scenarios. The transformation was remarkable to watch. Jennifer had always been intelligent and capable, but she had spent her career in environments where success was measured by abstract metrics and digital achievements. Now she was engaged in an activity that provided immediate, tangible feedback. The car responded instantly to her inputs, rewarding good technique with smooth operation and punishing mistakes with mechanical protests that were impossible to ignore. "This is incredible," she said as we cruised along a quiet country road. "I can feel everything the car is doing. When the engine is working hard, when the tires are losing grip, when the transmission is happy with my shift points. It's like the car is talking to me." "That's exactly what it's doing," I confirmed. "And that's why driving cars like this makes you a better driver overall. You develop instincts and awareness that transfer to any vehicle, even modern ones with all their electronic assistance." Emma had been documenting our driving lesson with her phone, capturing video clips and still photos of her mother's automotive education. She had become our unofficial social media manager, creating content for our educational platform that showed real people learning real skills in real time. Her footage of Jennifer's first successful clutch engagement had already received hundreds of views and dozens of encouraging comments from other platform subscribers. "Mom, you should see the comments on your driving video," Emma called from the back seat. "Everyone is so supportive. This one person says watching you learn to drive stick shift inspired them to finally tackle rebuilding their motorcycle engine." Jennifer smiled, but kept her eyes focused on the road ahead. She was beginning to understand that her learning process had become part of something larger, that her willingness to step outside her comfort zone and acquire new skills was encouraging others to do the same. We spent the rest of the morning exploring the mountain roads, with Jennifer gaining confidence and skill with each mile. She learned to rev match on downshifts, to use engine braking on steep descents, to feel when the car was approaching its limits and how to respond appropriately. Most importantly, she learned to trust herself and the machine she was controlling. By the time we returned home, Jennifer had driven nearly 50 miles of challenging roads without incident. She parked the Mustang in my driveway with a precision that would have been impossible just hours earlier, shut off the engine, and sat in silence for a moment, absorbing what she had accomplished. "I understand now," she said quietly, "why you were upset when I took your keys. This isn't just transportation. It's not even just a hobby. It's a form of expression, a way of connecting with something that's bigger than yourself." "It's all of those things," I agreed. "But more than that, it's proof that experience and skill matter, that some things can't be automated or outsourced or replaced by newer technology. The relationship between a driver and a well-tuned machine is as relevant today as it was 50 years ago." Over the following weeks, Jennifer continued her driving education, spending time behind the wheel of the Mustang whenever her schedule allowed. She practiced in parking lots and quiet neighborhoods, gradually building the muscle memory and Confidence required to handle the car in more demanding situations. Emma served as both instructor and encourager, sharing her own knowledge while celebrating her mother's progress. The change in Jennifer's relationship with cars was profound and immediate. She began noticing details about vehicles she had never paid attention to before. The sound of different engines, the way various transmissions shifted, the subtle differences in handling characteristics between different makes and models. Her Tesla, which had once represented the pinnacle of automotive technology to her, now seemed sterile and disconnected by comparison. More importantly, Jennifer's newfound appreciation for mechanical systems began to influence other aspects of her life. She started learning basic home repair skills, tackling projects she would have previously hired professionals to handle. She developed patience for processes that couldn't be rushed, respect for craftsmanship that took time to develop, and appreciation for the satisfaction that comes from working with your hands. Our educational platform benefited enormously from Jennifer's transformation. Her authentic enthusiasm for learning automotive skills resonated with subscribers who were on their own journeys from digital dependence to mechanical competence. She became one of our most popular instructors, not because she was an expert, but because she was a genuine beginner who wasn't afraid to make mistakes in front of the camera. I think there's something powerful about showing people that it's okay to be bad at something initially, Jennifer reflected during one of our content planning sessions. So much of modern life rewards people for already being competent, for having credentials and expertise. But real learning happens when you're willing to be awkward and uncertain and vulnerable. Her insight proved prophetic. The most popular content on our platform wasn't the advanced restoration techniques or complex diagnostic procedures, but the beginner-friendly lessons that showed real people learning basic skills. Subscribers wanted to see authentic struggle and genuine accomplishment, not polished demonstrations by established experts. Jennifer's journey from automotive skeptic to classic car enthusiast became a case study in the power of hands-on learning. Speaking invitations increased, with organizations wanting to hear about her experience transitioning from high-tech corporate work to traditional mechanical skills. She spoke at women's conferences about overcoming intimidation, at automotive events about bridging generational gaps, and at educational forums about the value of experiential learning. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The local chapter of the Classic Car Club of America invited Jennifer to present her story at their annual meeting, an honor typically reserved for established collectors and restoration experts. Her presentation, titled "Learning to Listen: What Classic Cars Taught Me About Real Skills," received a standing ovation from an audience of people who had initially been skeptical about a newcomer addressing their group. "A year ago, I thought I knew what competence looked like," Jennifer told the assembled car enthusiasts. "I thought it was about having the latest technology, the newest credentials, the most current expertise. I was wrong. Real competence is about understanding systems, solving problems, and maintaining things that matter. It's about patience, precision, and respect for knowledge that has been tested over time." The speech marked a turning point in Jennifer's relationship with the classic car community. She was no longer seen as an outsider trying to learn insider knowledge, but as a legitimate member of a group that valued skill over status, experience over youth, and craftsmanship over convenience. Emma, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity in her own right. Her natural teaching ability and infectious enthusiasm made her one of our platform's most requested instructors. She had developed her own series of lessons aimed at young people, breaking down complex automotive concepts into age-appropriate segments that made classic car ownership accessible to a new generation. "I want kids to know that they don't have to wait until they're adults to start learning this stuff," Emma explained in one of her videos. "Cars aren't just for grown-ups, and you don't need to be super strong or have lots of money to understand how they work. You just need to be curious and willing to try." Her message resonated with parents and educators who were looking for ways to engage children in hands-on learning activities. We began developing educational partnerships with schools and youth organizations, creating curricula that used automotive projects to teach broader lessons about physics, engineering, problem-solving, and persistence. The success of our platform had created opportunities none of us had anticipated when we first started working together. Publishers approached us about writing books. Television producers wanted to create shows featuring our teaching methods. Corporate sponsors offered funding in exchange for product placements and endorsements. But the most satisfying aspect of our success remained the individual transformations we witnessed every day. Messages from subscribers who had overcome their fear of working on cars, who had completed their first restoration projects, who had discovered confidence and capabilities they didn't know they possessed. One particularly memorable message came from a woman in Michigan who wrote, "I'm 45 years old and I just changed my first set of brake pads, thanks to Margaret's instruction and Jennifer's encouragement. I've been depending on other people to maintain my cars my entire adult life, and I never realized how empowering it would be to understand these systems myself. This isn't just about cars. It's about not being helpless, about being able to take care of the things that matter to me." Another subscriber, a recent college graduate in Ohio, shared, "I studied computer science because I thought that was where all the good jobs were, but I always loved working with my hands. Your platform showed me that technical skills and mechanical skills aren't opposites, they're complementary. I'm now working for a company that develops software for automotive diagnostic equipment, combining both of my interests in ways I never thought possible." These stories reminded us that our work was about more than just teaching people to fix cars. We were helping people discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed, encouraging them to value different forms of intelligence, and building bridges between traditional craftsmanship and modern technology. As spring turned to summer, our platform continued to grow and evolve. Jennifer had become not just my business partner, but a true collaborator and friend, someone who brought fresh perspectives to everything we did while maintaining deep respect for the traditions and values that had originally attracted her to our work. The keys to the Mustang had long since returned to my possession, but their significance had changed completely. They were no longer symbols of conflict or disrespect, but reminders of the journey Jennifer and I had taken together, from misunderstanding to mutual respect, from dismissal to partnership, from conflict to collaboration. Most importantly, they represented proof that learning and growth could happen at any age, that competence could be developed rather than simply inherited, and that the most valuable skills were often the ones that couldn't be automated or outsourced or replaced by newer technology. On warm evenings, the three of us would often take drives together, exploring the back roads of California in the cherry red Mustang that had started our journey. Jennifer would drive sometimes, her shifting now smooth and confident, her understanding of the car's capabilities deep and intuitive. Emma would navigate from the back seat, choosing routes that showcased both scenic beauty and interesting driving challenges. These drives had become more than just transportation or recreation. They were celebrations of what we had built together, demonstrations of what was possible when different generations and different kinds of expertise came together in mutual respect and shared purpose. The old conflicts seemed distant now, as irrelevant as yesterday's technology or last year's fashion trends. What remained was friendship, partnership, and the satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful together, 1 mile at a time. 2 years had passed since that March, morning when Jennifer first suggested I was too old to drive. Now, as I stood in the showroom of Barrett Jackson's Scottsdale auction house, watching her confidently negotiate with collectors and dealers, it was hard to believe we had ever been anything but partners. The Mustang sat on the auction block, under bright lights, its cherry red paint gleaming like liquid fire. The auctioneer's voice carried across the packed room as bids climbed steadily higher, each increment representing not just monetary value, but recognition of the craftsmanship and history that Jennifer had learned to appreciate. "Ladies and gentlemen, This 1967 Mustang Fastback represents the pinnacle of American muscle car restoration. Completely rebuilt by master mechanic Margaret Chen, this vehicle has been featured in our educational platform series and represents 40 years of expertise and passion. I felt Jennifer's hand squeeze my shoulder as the bidding reached 6 figures. Emma stood beside us, recording everything on her phone for our platform subscribers who couldn't attend the auction in person. She had grown so much in these 2 years, not just in height but in confidence and capability. At 11, she could diagnose engine problems by sound, explain complex mechanical principles to adults, and teach automotive skills to other children with natural ease. "Are you sure about this, Margaret?" Jennifer whispered as the bids continued, climbing. "It's not too late to withdraw the car from the auction." I shook my head, smiling at her concern. The decision to sell the Mustang hadn't been easy, but it was the right one. The car had served its purpose in my life, and now it was time for it to serve a different purpose entirely. "Every classic car has multiple chapters in its story," I replied. "This one's chapter with me is complete. It's time for the next chapter to begin." The final bid came in at $147,000, an amount that would have seemed impossible when I first bought the rusted shell for $800 decades earlier. But the money wasn't the point. The sale represented something far more valuable than financial gain. Jennifer had arranged for the proceeds to fund a scholarship program through our educational platform, providing free access to automotive education for young people from underserved communities. The Mustang that had once been a symbol of our conflict would now become a bridge to opportunity for the next generation of automotive enthusiasts. The auction house erupted in applause as the hammer fell. Collectors and enthusiasts approached us, offering congratulations and asking about the car's history. Jennifer handled most of these conversations, her expertise and enthusiasm evident in every exchange. She had become a respected voice in the classic car community, someone whose opinions carried weight and whose judgment was trusted. "The new owner wants to meet you," Jennifer said, guiding me toward a well-dressed woman in her 50s who had been the winning bidder. "Her name is Sarah Martinez. She's a collector from Arizona who specializes in perfectly restored muscle cars." Sarah greeted me with the kind of respect that one expert shows another. She had clearly done her research, asking detailed questions about specific modifications and restoration techniques. But what impressed me most was her genuine appreciation for the car's history and her commitment to preserving it properly. "I've been following your educational platform for months," Sarah explained. "My daughter is interested in automotive restoration, and your teaching methods have been invaluable. When I saw this car was going to auction, I knew I had to have it, not just as an investment, but as a way to support the work you're doing." She went on to explain that she planned to use the Mustang in her own educational efforts, taking it to car shows and youth events where it could inspire other young people to pursue automotive interests. The car would continue to teach and inspire, just in a different setting with a different owner. Emma had been quietly documenting our conversation, and she stepped forward with a question that surprised all of us. "Mrs. Martinez, would you be interested in having me come to one of your car shows? I could help explain the restoration process to other kids and show them that you don't have to be an adult to understand cars." Sarah's face lit up with delight. "I would love that. We're having a youth education day at the Phoenix Classic Car Show next month. Would you and your grandmother be willing to come and present a workshop?" The request led to a series of opportunities that none of us had anticipated. Emma became a sought-after speaker at automotive events throughout the Southwest, her natural teaching ability and infectious enthusiasm making her popular with both children and adults. She had found her calling at an age when most kids were still figuring out their basic interests. Jennifer and I continued to develop our educational platform, but our focus had evolved beyond simple technical instruction. We were now working with educators and child development specialists to create curricula that used automotive projects to teach broader life skills. problem solving, patience, attention to detail, pride in craftsmanship, and the confidence that comes from understanding complex systems. Our work had attracted attention from universities and research institutions interested in studying the connection between hands-on learning and cognitive development. Jennifer found herself consulting with educational technology companies, helping them understand how digital platforms could enhance rather than replace experiential learning. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She had returned to the tech industry, but as someone who understood the value of traditional skills and craft knowledge. Her unique perspective made her invaluable to companies trying to bridge the gap between digital innovation and real-world application. 3 months after the auction, Jennifer made an announcement that surprised no one who had been watching her transformation. "I've decided to go back to school," she said during one of our weekly planning meetings. There's a master's program in education technology at Stanford that focuses on integrating traditional crafts with modern learning methods. I want to formalize what we've been doing here and help other people create similar programs. Emma cheered at the news, already planning how she would help her mother with research projects and case studies. The two of them had become genuine partners in learning, each bringing different perspectives and capabilities to their shared interests. For my part, I felt a deep satisfaction in watching Jennifer pursue formal education that would enhance, rather than replace the practical knowledge she had gained. She wasn't abandoning what she had learned in my garage. She was building on it, finding ways to share it more effectively and reach broader audiences. The scholarship program funded by the Mustang sale had its first recipients that fall. 12. Young people from across California received free access to our educational platform, along with toolkits and mentorship opportunities. Their progress reports became some of our most popular content, showing real teenagers tackling real automotive projects with increasing skill and confidence. One of the scholarship recipients, a 16-year-old named Marcus from Oakland, sent us a video of his first successful engine rebuild. His excitement was infectious as he explained each step of the process, his pride evident in every word. His message reminded me why we had started this work in the first place. "I never thought I could do something like this," Marcus said in his video. "My friends think I'm crazy for spending weekends working on cars instead of playing video games, but this feels real in a way that nothing else does. I'm building something with my hands that will last and work and matter." Emma had become Marcus's unofficial mentor, providing encouragement and advice through our platform's messaging system. She took her role seriously, understanding that her support could make the difference between a young person persevering through difficult challenges or giving up when things got frustrating. As autumn turned to winter, our work continued to evolve and expand. Jennifer's academic pursuits were informing our platform development, while my decades of practical experience provided the foundation that kept everything grounded in reality. Emma served as both student and teacher, learning from us while helping us understand how to communicate effectively with younger audiences. The three of us had become an unlikely but effective team, each contributing different strengths to a shared mission. Age differences that had once seemed like obstacles had become advantages, providing diverse perspectives and complementary skills that made our work stronger. On a crisp December morning, Jennifer appeared in my garage carrying a small wrapped package. It was the anniversary of the day she had first asked to learn automotive skills, and she wanted to mark the occasion with a gesture of gratitude. Inside the package was a key ring, simple and elegant, engraved with the words, "Teacher, Partner, Friend," and the date of our first oil change lesson. It wasn't meant to replace the keys to the Mustang, which were now in Arizona with their new owner, but to represent something more enduring. "Thank you," Jennifer said simply, "for your patience, for your wisdom, and for showing me that it's never too late to learn something completely new." Emma stood beside her mother, holding her own small gift, a photo album she had created documenting our journey together. Pictures of Jennifer's first tentative attempts at engine work, of our collaborative platform development sessions, of the three of us covered in grease and grinning with satisfaction after completing challenging projects. The final photo in the album showed all three of us standing beside the Mustang on the day of the auction, our arms around each other's shoulders, our faces reflecting the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful work shared with people you care about. Looking at that photo, I realized that the story Jennifer had wanted to end when she took my keys had actually just been beginning. The real story wasn't about an old woman proving she could still drive, or a younger woman learning to respect her elders. It was about the possibility of transformation at any age, about the bridges that could be built between different generations and different kinds of knowledge. Emma would grow up understanding that competence came in many forms, that wisdom could be found in unexpected places, and that the most valuable skills were often the ones that couldn't be automated or outsourced. Jennifer had discovered that learning never stopped, that humility was a strength rather than a weakness, and that the most satisfying work combined passion with purpose. As for me, I had learned that teaching could be just as rewarding as doing, that sharing knowledge multiplied rather than diminished it, and that respect was something you earned rather than demanded. The keys Jennifer had taken from me that March morning had represented more than just access to a car. They had been symbols of independence, competence, and dignity. When she finally returned them, they had become symbols of something even more valuable: mutual respect, shared purpose, and the understanding that true partnership required both generations to contribute their unique strengths. Now, holding the new keyring Jennifer had given me, I understood that some gifts are meant to be passed on, some lessons are meant to be shared, and some stories are meant to inspire others to begin their own journeys of discovery and growth. The garage. Where we had worked together was quiet now, but it would never be empty. It held the memory of transformation, the echo of learning, and the promise that wherever our individual paths might lead, we would always carry with us the knowledge that it's never too late to learn something new, to build something meaningful, or to discover capabilities you didn't know you possessed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.